Now, everybody remembers this, right? How can you not? Every time you turned around, they were showing new images of it over and over and over and over and over. And again, fortunately, there happened to be a camera crew from France on the ground that day that caught this exact angle. And you know what the president called it? A new Pearl Harbor. And they beat that phrase into the public consciousness.
Most Americans remember exactly where they were on September 11th, 2001. It was obviously a day that forever changed the lives of every American.
But 9/11 was not the first time Americans were ambushed on our own soil. 70 years ago on December 7th, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor.
And so we wanted to get a better sense of how both of those days affected Americans. We found 2 survivors of those attacks. And as we listen to their stories, I think you'll find as well there's a remarkable similarity between the 2 mornings and the 2 days that would forever change the way these folks would see the world.
So there you go. The president stood on a pile of rubble and called it a Pearl Harbor. The news directly correlates it to Pearl Harbor. But the funny thing about all this is there's a thing called the Project for a New American Century. Have you ever heard of it? You should have. But if not, let me remind you. The Project for a New American Century was an assembly of people in power, the elites, and the list of people that belong to it goes on and on and on. But the funny thing is there's some people in here that you may recognize right away or right off the bat. Like Donald Rumsfeld, Secretary of Defense, Dick Cheney, Vice President, and Paul Wolfowitz, Deputy Secretary of Defense, and so very many others. But let's just look at these people for right now. Links will be in the description. What the Project for a New American Century did was it was a think tank. And these people wanted to change the way America went to war. So instead of doing giant false flags, tricking Americans into being sympathetic and patriotic and sending them off to war, they wanted to scrap all that and simply start attacking other countries. How do we know that? A very highly decorated general told us.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the joint staff who used to work for me. And one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, No. He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail."
Now, bear in mind, he goes through a list of 7 countries they wanted to take out in 5 years. Well, they've done that. But the funny thing about this is when he mentions this, notice how everyone in the audience laughs. Instead of gasping in horror, they all laugh. That kind of tells you where people were morally in 2001. 17 years later, we're at a catastrophic chasm right now, in my opinion. But let's go on. Here's a good layout of the exact conversation, and you can go through it yourself. It lists everybody, the same people that belong to a Project for a New American Century that just a year earlier wanted to start attacking countries and taking down governments because they were preparing for the New World Order. It's also the reason that even though Al Gore won the presidency, somehow George W. Bush was propelled into the seat because they needed him there so that they could do, well, this. This was their new Pearl Harbor. This had the fingerprints of the Israeli Mossad, Israel, and Zionist members of our government all over it. Everybody in this was basically linked to Zionism. Not only did this allow them to institute the Patriot Act, which was written in advance, and it went back to legislation previously written by Joe Biden, who right here claims his loyalty loud and clear.
There is this inextricable tie between culture, religion, ethnicity that most people don't fully understand. That is unique and, how can I say it, so strong with Jews worldwide. There is a, I mean, you know, I used to say early on when I was a kid, I'd say, when I was a young senator, I'd say, if I were a Jew, I'd be a Zionist. I am a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist.
And then again, come back to the list of the people the partial list of people associated with the PNAC project for a new American century. You'll notice there's an awful lot of really Jewish names in here. You see what I mean? An awful lot. And don't forget, most of these people changed their names to a more Goyim-friendly last name. But the long story short is, for people that don't seem to understand this stuff, this was all planned out in advance. These guys wanted this, and they weren't going to take no for an answer. And right now, it's happening all around us. You can go back and really look at things, let alone the fact that the buildings fell faster than free fall. I mean, it's impossible. The buildings fell as though there was no buildings below them. You see what I'm saying? They've told us. The evidence is everywhere. And this man was right behind it. This speech was given on September 11th, 1991, exactly 10 years before September 11th.
Certain that we stand at a defining hour. Halfway around the world, we are engaged in a great struggle in the skies and on the seas and sands. We know why we're there. We are Americans, part of something larger than ourselves. For 2 centuries, we've done the hard work of freedom, and tonight we lead the world in facing down a threat to decency and humanity. What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind: peace and security, freedom, and the rule of law.
Thessalonians 5:3. For when they shall say, peace and safety, peace and security, then sudden destruction shall come upon them. These people aren't playing around. The fingerprints are everywhere. Now, don't forget that this guy's son was put into the presidential seat from Florida, where his brother presided. And his brother, oddly enough, is also part of the Project for a New American Century. These guys wanted to start invading countries, and that's exactly what they did. But they needed a catalyst first, a new Pearl Harbor. We were warned. We were told. We were warned and we were told an awfully long time ago, but I'll just stick with the fairly present. We were told. They weren't kidding. Look into the links. Understand this for yourself. I'm not saying we're going to be able to stop these people, because it doesn't look like that. All I'm saying is it's time to get your spiritual house in order. There's a reason he's saying what they were saying. And I'm out.